To design in the moment, in a way, you have to really free yourself of really subjective ideas, really, in a way. And I travel, I travel in the world quite a bit, so I'm working in about 40 countries or so. Even more so, I've probably seen about 115 countries. And with that said, I'm kind of perpetually, I found myself in this kind of mode of observation, where I have to be kind of highly perceptive of, of just social needs, social desires, the way we're living, the way people communicate, all these sorts of things. And I find myself absorbing this kind of information constantly and really being hyper aware that I'm absorbing the information of the moment and the time that I'm existing. So with that said, I have to really, in a sense, almost free myself, almost as if I'm not really belong to this earth, almost as if I'm kind of looking like a satellite. And I'm looking down at the earth and I'm kind of observing humanity. And with that said, then I think, you're kind of freer to just feel and think and shape, in a way, what's almost, you could argue, necessary. I don't mean necessary just in the sense of function, but necessary in the sense of what our desires are today. I think that when we have things in our lives that really kind of elevate our human experience, it's an amazing feeling. I love that moment, in a way. And to design those kind of objects and to kind of live with those objects, I think I always consider the objects almost as almost like de-stressors. I used that word 20 years ago about the idea of the object being a de-stressor, that if I bring something into my life, in a way it should make my life better, not worse. But inevitably, because a lot of us accumulate a lot of things, and we have a lot of things in our lives that are really not bringing much meaning, where they become kind of obstacles, in a way. And also, I think to design a product or have a product that's not really an obstacle, it has to be, in a way, kind of relatively minimal. So in a way, even working, for example, with BoConcept, the ideas that I generated were very much about a sense of minimalism, but I use a word more of sensualism or minimal sensualism, which is this idea that even though they're relatively reductive, they're kind of an extension of us. They're very human somehow. And I think that kind of human quality is very, very important. But I think in the interior domestic environment, I think we become, or we're getting better, all of us as consumers, of kind of starting to edit what we need in our interior environment, what we would like in our interior environment. But we also are starting to realize that the interior environment is a very, very critical and very important part of our daily lives. And I think in a way you could argue that, and this is where the contradiction is, for years people went, over the top when it came to the kind of the domestic interior environment, but then the majority of people just kind of let it kind of almost, it was like the last consideration in their lives, in a way. And a lot of people, a lot of consumers would, be ready to kind of consume the latest of anything, technology or anything else. But when it came to their domestic environment, it was almost neglected, in a way. So I think we're starting to see a very, very, very big shift of that now, where that's becoming really kind of very important, I think. And hence why there's so much media about it, because I always believe that media kind of follows movements and trends, not kind of the other way around. So, media is really kind of exposing all of a sudden this notion that we have all these kind of, now we're starting to have all these kind of beautiful options and beautiful furnishings that are kind of really, really, in a sense, elevating, and I just want to repeat this, the human experience. You can't just go around the world and just do whatever you want. And this is like, I think, a lot of times the misconception a lot of people have about designers is that they just kind of dream these things up. Most of the time, 99% of the time, your hands are tied with the client you work for. And ideally, it's something that I've always believed is that in order to produce really good work, you have to become kind of, in a sense, very hypersensitive to the company you work with. So you need to understand the culture of the company, the history of the company, where they're going, where the company's going, the kind of philosophy of the company, the production technologies of the company, the kind of materials, the price points. You have to really kind of, in a sense, again, kind of like a sponge, absorb as much as you can of that company. Then, so the balance starts to become, now when you start to work, or I start to design, I need to design within that criteria, or within that parameters. If I can, I think if you're kind of, and I think this is quite important, if you can do that, inevitably you can do some very, very successful work. And the work at the end of the day becomes a kind of collaboration of, you could argue, of two brands or two cultures or two minds, in a sense.